What's up, addicts? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we are going to be breaking down the fantasy outlook for Julio Jones, wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. But before we get started, hit that subscribe button for us for more content like this, and let's get right into the video. Now, Julio Jones seems to be around this time of the year. Every year he starts to be very disrespected. We've seen multiple years now where, although he always finishes amongst the elite tier of receivers, he keeps dipping to about the middle to the end of the second round, and I'm not really sure why this phenomenon keeps happening. It'll probably be corrected again by the time we do our drafts in August, so maybe this won't really matter much, but right now you can get him at a massive discount, and I'm all for that. Last year he finished with just one reception shy of 100 and 1394 receiving yards. He did miss one game with a shoulder sprain, but still has been able to stay active for most games, even when dealing with injuries. Only 6 touchdowns. That's kind of been the one lacking part of his statistical production is in the touchdown department, which really hasn't made sense, but you can never really be positive at what point that could actually trend back up. So it's kind of hard to project touchdowns for Julio each year, but projecting receptions and receiving yards has been rather easy. Last year he finished with the third most fantasy points at 274.1 and the third most fantasy points per game at 18.3, making him well worth a late first, early second round pick where he ended up going. So continues to be very consistent year in, year out. Now, and when we look at his game by game production, it did kind of come in spurts. He had a few down games, but even his down games were pretty close to 10 points there. Multiple 4 weeks where he finished as a top 6 wide receiver, 2 more weeks as a top 12, and pretty consistent overall. Definitely saw a massive increase to his targets once Calvin Ridley was down, including that incredible 20 target game against San Francisco in Week 15, helping a lot of people make their fantasy championships. If you're in the playoffs during Week 15, Julio Jones was absolutely dominant in the fantasy playoffs last year. Really good for pretty much the entire year. So there's not really much more analysis that needs to go into this unless we're expecting him to regress a little bit this year, which I do think that there is some warrant to that. Heading into year 31, at some point he's going to hit a cliff. Calvin Ridley is coming on, probably will have a little bit more of a prominent role, but there's plenty of vacated targets to go around for Calvin Ridley and Hayden Hurst and Todd Gurley to get involved without them having to steal from Julio Jones. Outside of those guys, there's really not that much going on. Russell Gage is more of a special teamer. He might be involved somewhat. They also signed Laquan Treadwell, who's pretty much been a bust his entire career. So not really worried about the rest of the pieces in this offense. I think there's plenty of passing to go around. This defense doesn't project to be much better this year, so the offense is going to still have to continue to throw a ton of passes. Last year, the Falcons threw more passes per game than any other team, so not really much to fear in terms of the team around Julio Jones. So the main thing that you could question then is, will his efficiency continue to drop? We did see his yards per reception drop almost a whole yard this last year. He was only 30th in the NFL, so that could continue to drop a little bit. Maybe that drops into the 13s. But overall, if he's continuing to get the volume and the deep targets that he was getting last year, it really won't matter too much. Ended up with 31 deep targets. That's the second most in the entire NFL. 156 targets, also second best. Completed air yards, 1,054. Again, second best. Yards after the catch, still better than guys like Calvin Ridley on the same team who aren't really good with creating a lot of yards after they catch the ball. 340, which is 15th best in the NFL. Yards per pass route, 2.82. That's 6th best. And total target distance, number 1 amongst receivers at 1962. So he's still one of the most involved receivers for his respective team in the entire NFL. So unless he takes a massive decline in his ability to win at the catch point, his ability to run routes, like, we haven't really seen the decline yet, so it'll happen eventually. If I had to project when it would happen, I would expect it to come closer to his year 32 season. I think he still has at least one elite year left, possibly 2 or 3. It could just be a flipping unicorn and be able to continue to play at a high level into his mid 30s. But we didn't really see any decline over the course of the year, and that's typically a telltale sign for these guys when towards the end of the year they start to slow down a bit. Last year we saw Julio Jones actually ramped up his production towards the end of the year, so I'm not worried about his age at this point. Until he shows us that he's declining, I'm going to continue respecting Julio Jones in redraft leagues. So we have him projected pretty close to where he finished last year. Slight decline, mostly because we're expecting Calvin Ridley to actually finish a entire season. So that would put him at 97 receptions, 1343 receiving yards, and 7 total touchdowns, which again, that could vary anywhere between 4 and 15. So there's plenty of upside to be had with Julio Jones. He's pretty easy to project outside of the touchdown department, so hence the only 4 out of 5 upside ranking, even though he could actually finish as the number 1 overall receiver if everything goes his way or some of the other receivers around him don't produce in the way that we're expecting them to. So Julio Jones, if you can get him as your wide receiver 1 after drafting a really good running back, that's going to be a very tempting strategy, and fading Julio Jones in the past has been a bad idea, so I'm not going to be expecting to do it again this year. So love Julio Jones, and you guys should too. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know if there's anyone else on the Falcons you want me to look at. We'll be breaking down Calvin Ridley and Hayden Hurst next, but if you want me to look at guys like Russell Gage, we can do that as well. So let me know, and hit me up in the comment section with any other questions you might have. We'll see you guys in the next video.